da kanulia Priscilla Colón o ta dakto ka tekina Taíno. Hello, my name is Priscilla Colón, and I'm a Taíno teacher. I consider myself a language nerd because I love languages, because I love to know how people think. It's not necessarily about speaking a lot of languages, but I do speak a few. Um, I am a bilingual speaker of Spanish. I learned English when I was in second grade, so my native language is actually Spanish. Studied French, later became a Spanish school teacher, and found myself in the textbook publishing industry, creating a lot of educational materials. So I spent a lot of time, more than 20 years actually, in that industry, and then language learning software. And along the way, I got to meet people from all around the world. I quickly kind of moved away from Spanish, but then was leading projects in languages that I had never heard of, languages whose alphabets were still in the decision phase, which is really interesting. Oral languages that were just getting writing systems. And so the reason I kind of give a little overview of that is that looking back at my life, I realized that all of that was preparing me. That's still categorized as extinct, 530 plus years after our people were classified as extinct. So that's kind of like a big overview. And then in 2020, right around COVID, where everyone was having one of those, like, what am I doing here with my life? One of those existential moments. I had one of those as well. It started this journey of having to look not just at myself, but seeing that there was a big gap in history. A lot of knowledge that I didn't know about my Indigenous ancestors. I didn't know where I came from. And so using that kind of language nerd brain, I started delving into the language, and I said, there must be something. There must be some remnants. I can connect through the language because it allows me to see how people think. And so that's when I stumbled on the fact that there was one linguist who was helping to revitalize the language. He'd published one book. He spent more than a decade researching, and that was the first modern variant of Taíno from 530 years ago that now we can use to speak and communicate in full sentences and really help bring back to life this rich, not just language, but the culture behind it that is encoded in the language. The Taíno language was what we can call a lingua franca. It was the area of what is the modern day Caribbean. So we believe it was the language that was understood by most people. And by the way, the word that we use, Taíno, is really something that we're calling ourselves nowadays, and that we're calling this language. We don't necessarily know what our people called it, what our ancestors called it, or what our ancestors called themselves. It was spoken in places that we know. Puerto Rico, the original name Boriquen, is still used by the Boricua people. Like, if when you hear someone say Boricua, like, you know you're Puerto Rican. That literally means the person from Boriquen. The Cuba, Jamaica, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Virgin Islands, and even as far north as Florida and even Georgia, we're finding archaeological remnants, and as far south as of the Americas. I also have to put it into context that this area was really where people from North, Central, and South America would congregate. So we weren't these isolated people in the middle of the ocean. Actually, this was a place where people would come and congregate. We found archaeological evidence from the southern part of the U.S., like, for example, turquoise coming from the southern part of the U.S., jade from the areas that we now understand of the Yucatan Peninsula where the Mayan were. We have I know this is for those who love hamsters, gerbil, and the such, and guinea pigs. The guinea pig was traded by our people, so they were domesticated in what is now Peru and Colombia, and they were a delicacy that was eaten, and city, but it was the Caribbean. And this is the hub of where all Indigenous America came to trade and exchange information. Some of the biggest ballparks were there. Astronomical observatories we're now discovering were there. So it's that, now imagine that all these people who come from all these places have to understand each other. That's where the language comes in. So it wasn't necessarily like the only language spoken in these islands or even parts of the islands, but it was understood to be a lingua franca. Now, going back to how this impacts us today, when the Europeans got to the Caribbean, so we know the famous 1492 voyage, what they started hearing and documenting was this language. So we believe that our people used that language, assuming one. And then how does that impact folks today? Why should anyone care? Well, most of the words that were incorporated when the Europeans first came to the New World were actually, the first ones were Taíno. So hurricane, huracan, canoe, canoa, even savannah. Barbecue, barbacoa, savannah was another one, iguana, and you're like maize, maize, like wait, what? Like you start realizing all of these words made their way into European and other languages around the world as well. So in essence, the journey I've been on for the last 5 years, using my professional and my personal skills with languages, was really a way for me, now looking back, to realize I was supposed to be training, all my life to be able to now help revitalize this language that is just at its nascent phase. It's just being reborn, and we're cultivating it like a little seed, watering it and doing, beautiful exchanges like this one here, which is actually leading to this awareness raising and so on.
Because I mean, it's fascinating. Like you said, it's still technically considered extinct, just like the Taíno people. But so even, I don't know, 10 years ago, you probably wouldn't have been able to write your children's book because it wasn't a written language yet, right?
That's correct. So it took, big shout out to the hyper polyglot, Javier Hernandez, who actually was the first to develop this modern variant of Taíno. It took him about a decade to even get his book together. And he used this process, the same process that was used to revitalize, for example, modern day Hebrew. And actually, modern day Hebrew is a creation. He used that same process, the same process that is being used, for example, to revitalize other indigenous languages like the Wampanoag language in Massachusetts, and Aboriginal languages in Australia are using the same process. So he had to gather information for all of the documented language, anything that was written down. He had to look at Arawak sister languages. Those are languages that are still spoken by native speakers that have remained relatively unchanged. All around the northern parts of Venezuela, Colombia, other islands, and even the Garifuna people who are now in Honduras and other parts of Central America, they all contributed. And then there's an interesting part, and one that is, people who don't work in languages are always kind of weirded out by this, and it has to do with the fact that languages are constantly evolving, so you have to create new terms for vocabulary that did not exist. When I worked in the private sector, I got to work with languages where the alphabet was still a contention. As Urdu, for example, we were still creating new words for things like GPS.
Right.
Like GPS, global positioning system. How do you translate that into Urdu? Are people going to understand it? Like if you say global positioning system, people don't even know what that is.
Right.
And so he also had to go through that process of creating words for terms that did not exist in the late 1400s, 1500s, because language is constantly evolving. Most people don't understand that, for example, refrigerator is actually a fairly new term because there was no refrigeration.
Right.
Usually it was an ice box. or computers, streets and avenues, the names of continents that we didn't know about. All of those things have to be created, and it's something that happens every day, and we just don't even realize it. We just see that Daniel Webster came out with a new dictionary this year, and they added a bunch of words that are just part of our vernacular. So the same process happened to Taíno, and because I started off as a teacher, I've worked in education, I realized I couldn't just learn this by myself. I had to teach it. And that's where the passion started. It was like, yes, I need to teach this to others. I'm sure there are people who are hungry for this knowledge the same way that I am, because I really wanted to reconnect to a part that I had lost, that my parents had lost their parents and so on. And so this project started off as posting YouTube videos about everything I was learning. And then it like snowballed from there. And I had to create children's books and an international conference. And now there are more and more people who are joining in this movement. Different groups have created their own variants. Different individuals have created their own variants. So, of course, that always leads to like, well, who's right, who's wrong? And I will quote one of the caciques or chiefs in the Taíno community, and he always says, Cacique Jorge Esteves, he says, well, 4 years ago we didn't have anything, and now we have 4. Wonderful. Now we have more dictionaries to choose from. We all assumed that the reason we are who we are, we look the way that we look, historically speaking, since the textbooks said that our ancestors had all but been disseminated, we all assumed that modern day Puerto Ricans were just simply a combination of our African and European ancestors. But to find that 61% of us actually has indigenous DNA, now you have to like think back and say, okay, the DNA is proving what our parents and our grandparents have told us all along. But the DNA actually proves something else. Our ancestors, like most indigenous Americans, were matrilineal, matriarchal. Now that's important. Now, if you understand that you're tracing your family, and if you look at clans, the clan system is based on the fact that you can trace your family from your mother's line. And who's usually the head of the clan? It is the eldest grandmother. And so because genetically, when a baby is born, the mother knows it's her baby. So there's no question what family that baby belongs to. But matrilineal societies specifically are structured in a way where the grandmother, the oldest woman, is the head of the clan. That is her family. The children belong to the clan, the mother's clan. It's not to say that the father's isn't important, but the children specifically belong to the mother's clan. In our society, for example, it was documented that the men moved in with the mother's family. So if there was what we term as marriage, actually he would move in with the family. Not the other way around. The woman wasn't moving in with him. No, it was the other way around. And in most indigenous American societies, the women's family was also in charge of cultivating the land and being keepers of the land. So everything that had to do with the land, with the family, was all the woman's domain. And so it makes sense now that when we look at our indigenous DNA, 61% of us would be indigenous. And moreover, the reason I bring this up is because the geneticists found that most of it was coming from the mitochondrial DNA. The mitochondrial DNA is the one that is on your X chromosome, which is passed down by your mother. So now we have a steady line of indigenous ancestry through our mother's lines. And so honestly, this 2010 study, as I've been researching more and more, kind of revolutionized us as descendants. More people kind of started waking up to what they already knew, and an interest started developing. So we have that now paired with the linguistic revitalization and work that has been going on the cultural piece for a long time. I think we've got the kind of the 3 legs to the stool that are going to help all of us reconnect to our roots.
It's so exciting. I mean, like you said, I mean, it's been 500 years, and then suddenly in the past like decade and a half, there's so much happening, and you're such a big part of that. Tell us about how your children's books kind of fit into this larger project of language revitalization. Why, and especially because I know you're really interested in the educational component. How are the children's books helping revitalize the Taino language?
Well, I harken back to myself when I was a child. So I didn't necessarily grow up knowing, like, in a conscious way I was indigenous. I mean, my parents said, "Oh yeah, somos indio," like we're Indian, like, but it wasn't something that was like overtly like this is particular indigenous or this is other thing is particularly indigenous. And the language certainly wasn't. I wasn't told that I was speaking an indigenous language until I started doing my own research and realized, oh my gosh, this Puerto Rican Spanish
Mm.
is really a lot of Taíno. Like, there are words that I use every day that quote unquote standard Spanish speakers don't use. Why? Because these are loan words from specifically from Boriquen, the language spoken on the island. Um, and so I wanted to bring that to children because if you know who you are and where you come from, I mean, there are no limits to you. You can do whatever you want. And one of the really detrimental consequences of this Taino extinction myth that has been fed to our own people through textbooks. I mean, my parents were born and raised in Puerto Rico. This is what they learned. And my father was born in 1937. And I hear from friends who are like, yeah, I went to school in the 90s in Puerto Rico and I still learned this. It was that the Taino people were so docile that they just keeled over and died, that they never fought, that they like it's like the weirdest like construction just to basically say, and they're all extinct, and so we will move forward, you know. And so like if you're fed, over and over again, you're like, my people were so docile they didn't even fight for themselves. They just died. Where do I come from? I don't come from anyone then. And
Mm.
so in order for me to like start combating that, I decided to write these children's books so that kids were connecting their everyday lives to the Taino culture, to the Taino language, and just see the continuity of it, right? So there's a book that talks about, it's called The Twisty Vine, and it talks about what you do in the garden, the kinds of gardening that you see. But then we talk about the three sisters and what are those words in Taino? And did you know that our Taino ancestors used to have a kunuku, which is their word for garden? And then why is that important? And so tying it back, not just back to our roots, but also modern day times. And so it was important for me to start. So I started by teaching short words, short phrases, and so on. And then the latest book, which I have a copy of here, and I'll just show, Hahom, a Taino Book of Thanks.
Which is the
It's
one that is our giveaway for this week. So if you like it, make sure you enter our giveaway.
yes.
Yes.
So that one is now completely in Taino
Mm.
with the English translations, but you also get, again, fun facts about the Taino people, the pronunciation guide and dictionary. I am a teacher, so after all, so I have to teach. So it's loaded with a lot of little things, not just the story in rhyme in Taino, but then you also get to see the bilingual translation. And I'm working on the Spanish version right now, and that should be out in a couple of weeks. So our Spanish speaking audience can also share it with their kids. But you get to learn, you get full sentences in Taino every single page.
It's amazing. And you also see the Taino script, which I
Mm.
thought is so cool looking. I mean, it's so completely different than the Roman script, but it's beautiful. I mean, so if anybody, even if you just if you don't have a copy, if you just pull up the cover of the book, has it on there from the illustrator's name, I believe.
Yeah,
Isn't
so
that?
that's actually my name in Taino.
Oh, is that you?
But
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah,
Okay.
so let me just show it there. So that one's an interesting one. So that's a script that was developed by the Nahuatl school community. It was actually their former head, Dr. Dari Melendez, who passed away during COVID. She helped develop that script based on some of the symbols that have been found all around the islands. And so that's actually my Taíno name, which is Siba, which is stone. And I do the illustrations as well in the book.
Oh, I don't think I realized that. And the illustrations are just gorgeous. I think I missed that. I didn't realize that that was you as well. They're really beautiful. And we should mention this is also being included in, just to put it in the even larger context that you were talking about earlier about all indigenous language and endangered languages around the world. This is part of a UNESCO collection of children's books written in, is it in indigenous languages or in endangered languages? I'm not sure.
So this one's interesting. I don't know if I told you that. There is a sort of a submittal process for that over the next year. A collection of children's books for indigenous and endangered languages is being put together. And I did submit this particular book to be included. So fingers crossed that they choose it. But they are putting it together as part of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages, which I can go into some of the broader work that I'm doing. But it is important for folks to know a lot of the Taíno community does not realize that the International Decade of Indigenous Languages is going on. It was established in 2022. It runs through 2032. And so if you're in a Taíno community or any other indigenous community, please reach out to, you can Google International Decade of Indigenous Languages, IDIL. You can become a partner. So my organization, Casa Areyto, is a partner with them. That means that as a partner, you can contribute officially on their website all of your resources. So all of my books are now official contributions to the International Decade. All of the presentations for the international conference I've put together for Taíno are all official recommendations. And can you imagine 530 years ago, like thinking that our ancestors would be now all their descendants are now part of this like amazing decade and have official contributions. So my goal is to make sure that we're raising awareness at that international level so that this extinction myth, we got to end it. And what better way to do it? And I have to share one funny story.
Yes.
Is that because Taíno is still considered extinct, my organization, I was talking with UNESCO for about 6 months and we're like, yes, we're going to become partners. Wonderful. We were approved. And they're like, now you can upload all of your official, support materials and content. I went in and I started getting my space ready and I look for the language in the drop down and it's not there.
Oh.
Because it's officially extinct. so then there was like 4 months of going back and forth. Can we please add Taíno? Oh, we got it from the World Atlas of Languages. It's still extinct. We're going to ask them to add it in. So think about visibility. Visibility is getting your language in a drop down. So there was a little hurdle, and then we were able to start getting all of our contents up there.
So I was just reading, we've got some really great comments on here, and we're so excited because I know a lot of you are also excited about this revitalization, the Taíno language. I'm just looking at the time. I knew this was going to be a problem, especially with this one, because we met ahead of time and talked for a really long time.
Oh boy, I'm
feel
sorry.
Like I could do more. No, I love it. I feel like I would sit and listen to you for hours because it's so fascinating to me. As somebody who loves history and culture and language, it all kind of comes together in this story, and it's so exciting what you're doing. So maybe we could just wrap up. You can kind of put this in the context of like your larger work and where it's going and where do you see this process going in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started off with Taíno, but I really realized that I've always been kind of a person of the world. And I really need to help as many people as possible. So I did officially join UNESCO's International Decade of Indigenous Languages. I'm the co-chair of Ad Hoc Group 1 on Education. That means that we're working on creating policy recommendations to be adopted by 194 UNESCO member states over the next few years to ensure that every indigenous language is preserved for the future. so that it's encoded in our laws. And this is serious work that we're undertaking. That's every indigenous language. So on the wider scale, what I'm doing through the work that I'm partnering with folks at UNESCO, with folks in government. Honestly, I'm getting the word out on Capitol Hill. At not just for our own state, but also reaching across states, for example. Um, it's really about not just making sure that every language is preserved, but making sure that there's a Taíno in the room. Because if people have never met a Taíno person, have never heard of the language, like I'm sure the majority of people tuning in may not have ever heard of the language. Well, now it's my job to be the ambassador, right? So, this morning I met with another coacher who is from Latvia, and he's helping to preserve the Livonian language. And one of the repertoires, she's the one who reports on technology, and her native indigenous language is Ekpeye from Nigeria. And the three of us were having a conversation of how to create a collaborative project involving song and cultural exchanges. Can you imagine a Latvian, a Nigerian, and a Taíno woman creating these connections across continents? So this is what I'm talking about. It's, yes, we have to revitalize our language and keep our mind on that, but let's think globally. What can we do if we band together as indigenous people? Well, we're going to be raising awareness in Latvia. The Latvians will know about Taíno people. The Nigerians will know about Taíno people. And then in Boriquen, the Boricua will also know about the Latvian and the Nigerian indigenous languages. So this is kind of, I've always been the kind of person who likes to go into like small little details and then widen it out. That's my 30,000 foot view, is that what we're creating is going to be a revitalization effort for everyone. Part of the work that I'm also doing, if I may, for just a few minutes, is to digitize indigenous languages around the world. And so we are literally using digital technology. No one here would be able to type in English if it weren't for one little company, a nonprofit called Unicode. Unicode is the company that allows anyone to type in any language on any digital device. We're working with them to create a hub so that all indigenous communities can come in and digitize their languages by going into that hub and starting the process. So imagine over the next 5 years, this hub is finished. And I'm saying it over and over again because I want to put it out into the universe.
Manifest it.
I'm manifesting. I keep telling my colleagues, this is my dream. So we're working the groups from UNESCO and Unicode and Big Tech. We are now working together to ensure that we start digitizing all of our languages, so that maybe in a few years, somebody will be typing completely in the Taíno script.
Amazing. Yeah. And especially, I love how this is bringing together what's thought of as a language that was extinct 500 years ago, and you're bringing it into the digital age. I mean, you're kind of making that pitch. It's amazing. And another wonderful comment, thanking you for your work, and so happy that they found you. I'm so happy that we found you and that we had a chance to talk. It's very exciting. Like I said, I feel like we could go on talking forever, but I'm going to be respectful of your time. So I'll go ahead and end it, but everybody should go to Casa Areyto, find out more about what Priscilla is doing and all of this exciting work. And if you want to win, enter to win a copy of the latest book, which is Hahom, Taíno Book of Thanks. Be sure to enter the giveaway. It ends tonight at midnight, and it just takes a couple minutes to enter, so don't miss out on that. Thank you, Priscilla, for joining us today. It was so fun to talk to you.
Oh, it was wonderful. And if I may, one last one.
Yes.
Go to casaareyto.com and start learning Taíno for free. There's a full digital course, the world's first, that was just published. You get an entire year's worth of lessons. So we're digitizing it all.
Oh, that's really exciting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hahom, thank you all. And I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to me today.
Oh, well, we appreciate you being here, and we appreciate all of you for watching and for being as excited as we are about this revitalization process. So thanks to all of you. Again, we're taking a couple weeks off, so we will see you again in January. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Taíno ti.